The most valuable thing you can give me is your attention. You watched my last video, the comments. I just can't thank you enough. I enjoy so much. Yeah, you get satisfaction out of someone watching your content, but the interaction, comments, it's a snippets of a conversation. I just really enjoy it, and I just appreciate you so much. I don't take for granted your time. It's the most perishable thing you have, and accompanied with your attention, which you willingly give me your attention. I get it. And I vow to never lose sight of the value of your attention. The most valuable thing you can give me is your attention. Thank you. This little camera, the OG, this small, unique, talented, cute, quirky little camera is my favorite video camera. It's not the best, it's just my favorite. Smaller, unique, quirky, and talented. It's like the Danny DeVito of cameras. The OG. Came out in 2013. It shoots raw 1080p, and that's it. And when you get it right, it's beautiful. There are a million ways to grade the raw footage from the bmpcc, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera Original, the OG. There's a million ways to grade it right and do it right. This is just one thing I wanted to share with you, a plugin called FilmBox that I think it's right up there with Dehancer and others. It's just you don't hear that much about it. I bought it. I use it. I use it in DaVinci Resolve. And I really like what it does in certain cases and certain uses. I wanted to share it with you. FilmBox is a third-party plugin. It comes from a company called Video Village, and that's where you actually go. You go to videovillage.com if you want to check it out. Their color and tone data sets. They use scene-referred images, and also it is built to work with different cameras and different color sciences from different camera manufacturers, which is a little bit like Film Convert in that way. My opinion, its built-in halation effect that you can add and adjust is the best that I've seen. And then grain and texture. And that's the thing. I think a lot of what is out there in terms of adding grain to emulate film, it adds grain, and we see that and we're kind of used to seeing it digitally. But I think what FilmBox does is it actually does add grain and texture, which is more similar to actual film back in the good old days, which actually looks a lot different than what we do a lot in film emulation now. It actually is much less sharp, much more grainy, much more imperfection than what we actually credit the old film with. I think FilmBox does a good job with that also. And if you wanted to take it a step further and even go into sort of like the old 16 millimeter film emulation and add the gate and the dust and the specs, if you wanted to go that far with it, and that's in this plugin also. All that to say, before I show it to you, let me just say, this is not at all a very comprehensive grading tutorial. It's simply, I just want to share FilmBox with you. I use it, and I've been surprised at how little, information and even tutorials and things there are out there about FilmBox for a third-party plugin that does such a good job, in my opinion. It may be because it's very expensive. A yearly license is, I think, $350. You can get a perpetual license, and it's like $1,000, so it's pretty expensive. I actually pay for it quarterly, so every quarter I pay $130 to keep the license. The cost may be one reason that, it's sort of prohibitive for a lot of people, but it does a really good job I think. Let me just show you an example, and it might be something that you want to consider when it comes to your own footage with this little guy. We're in Blackmagic RAW. This is Gen 1 shot at ISO 800. So Gen 1 on the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. And so this is just one basic, very basic process that a lot of people would begin with. And that is color space transform, in that first node. And it's going to bring it up to Rec 709. Just input color space, Gen 1, gamma, input gamma, Blackmagic design, and into the timeline, which is Rec 709, gamma 2.4 on the space, and timeline is Rec 709A because I'm on a Mac. Some LUT at a, whatever degree, at a varying degree, to then, bring it into whatever contrast and sort of a look that you want. And it's just one example is all that is. And this is something that would be usable. You would probably adjust your contrast and your shadows, and, it's not bad. It's really kind of filling up your waveform. So there's that. It's just one way to do it. Transform, use a LUT, get it where you want it, and then adjust your, exposure contrast from there based on your shot. Here's the way I use FilmBox. So like before, starting out in Gen 1, but because FilmBox does not have a Gen 1 option, it's either Blackmagic Design Gen 5 wide gamut or 4.6. I go with 4.6 and then come into my RAW settings on the original Pocket Cinema camera, change it from Gen 1 to Gen 4, which matches better with this source of 4.6, film 4.6, Gen 4, and it works for me. That's the way I use it on the original. Okay, so we go there, and then we add. This is FilmBox. This is what FilmBox does to it when you add it. You change it to Gen 4, go in and add FilmBox, and immediately this is the look that you get. And you can already see, some of these things like, you can see your grain, which it adds automatically, and you can turn that on off as you see fit. Your colors are a little bit more muted. They are a little more, what you would call film-like, in that they are dense. They're, blues are blue-green, greens are more yellow, and there is some halation going on with some of your highlights that you could only see if you look closely, but it is there just automatically on first glance. So then what I do after adding the FilmBox node and forming it to 4.6 on full mode. I'm not in the camera settings right now in terms of exposure and that kind of thing, which gives you those options. I'll leave it at 250D clean. That's what I like mostly anyway, so we'll leave it there. I'll come back later and we'll take a look at grain and halation. So one of the first things I do is I add an exposure node before the FilmBox node, and then I add one after. So this is more like an input exposure, and this is more like a adjustment to the contrast levels after the FilmBox node, if that makes sense. So beforehand, I've raised it a little bit, and that's just done. I just done it with the curves. What I want to do is just kind of lift everything a little bit. It's good at the bottom. And in the post, what I've done is I've crunched the top of it a little bit. You see here, I've added the curve at the top, and what that has done is sort of crunched the upper end of the highlights just a little bit. I'll show you before and after on that. If we turn those two off, that's your exposure, the exposed shot just with FilmBox added, and that's with a little bit of pre and post exposure. The next thing that I do, these are DCTLs that I'm using to adjust specific colors and specific looks within the image. You can you see what the image looks like here, but I'll show you this DCTL. This is a film density OFX DCTL, and I'll do my best to add a link to that in the description for you. I've adjusted the film density and added a little more weight to the red and to the blue. And when you turn this on, this is what you get if you look at the image. So, first of all, you can pay attention to the reds there. You can see I'm adding density to the reds. And then the last DCTL is a color specific. It's called Tetra. And again, I'll give you a link to that in the description. And all I've done there is I have gone in on this. I have raised the red back up a little bit. The density is still there. It just brightens it a little bit, you'll see. And then the other thing I've done, lessened sort of the brightness and the density on the yellows. And you'll see that in the leaves of the trees, and it makes it a little bit more realistic. So this is with that off, and this is with it on. And you can see a major difference. Okay, if you just concentrate on that, I'll turn it on for you. See what it's doing? It's still dense. It's still very heavy red. It's just it takes it from a very faded orange red now into a rich, very much a kind of almost a 60s red. And then the other is if you do look at the trees. So pre-Tetra color DCTL, I'm a light sort of faded yellow-green. And now look what I've done with that. It's added what I think is a little bit more of a realistic, denser, darker, lower by taking the reds and the greens out and down a little bit in those. And so, it's made a difference. And so if we take those out, I'll turn both DCTLs off. This is FilmBox with exposure added to bmpcc original footage. And this is FilmBox and exposure with DCTLs. And to me, that's a really strong look on this particular clip. The other thing is too, you've got a lot of grain going on right there. And what I would do if I were going to use this, I would go into the FilmBox settings. I'd go into advanced on grain and most likely bring the strength down. One thing I might do is get a really good close look at it, bring that strength all the way down, and then just add it back in, maybe kind of a quarter or half of what it was. So if you look right here, it's kind of the edge. It's one of those flags hanging there. You can see clearly in that circle the halation, or halation, Southern for halation, the halation effect that's added. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. I'll turn it off. Okay, see, so it's definitely adding it at the default settings on 250D. It's definitely adding that red halation effect around the brightest highlights or a few of those bright highlights areas.